Welcome back to the Pushing Through Loss podcast, where we share stories, honor resilience, and embrace strength. I am Kalila Green Siciliano, and it is my honor to begin the journey with you. I cannot believe that it's been 6 months since I started the Pushing Through Loss podcast. We've heard from so many different people who have lost pregnancies, who have lost children, who have lost parents and siblings and grandparents and loved ones. And we realized how needed this conversation is. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. I want to thank each and every one of you for your support throughout the last 6 months. And here's the next 6 months of continuing to hear stories from people, not just in who they lost and how they learned how to deal with it, but how they're thriving on the other side. The whole purpose is that you're still here, and you're still here for a reason. So it's never easy to lose a baby, to lose a child, to lose a parent or a sibling or someone that you love, but you're still here. And finding that reason and finding that purpose is really why I started this podcast and why I continue to do this podcast. So with that said, welcome to the 6-month anniversary episode of Pushing Through Loss. Adinah and I just met, and so far we've had a funny conversation, which is really interesting given the seriousness of these topics that we both talk about. But I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start at the beginning? Because I know you had mentioned you have a book, obviously, and it really is all about the infertility journey and what the process was, what the experience was like. So tell me a little bit about how you started.
How I started my book?
Well, what brought you to the book in terms of your infertility journey?
Well, as far as my infertility journey, my book is Butterfly Blue, The Pain of Infertility and the Power of Forgiveness. And when my husband came to me, we've been married now for 24 years. We had been married for about 8 years. When he came to me and said, I think I want to have kids.
Oh,
Prior to that, I was a youth counselor for 14 years. So when we met, I said, I don't want to have kids. And he was like, great, I don't either. So it was the whole thing. And then after I turned 35, because, as years went along and everybody was like, when are you having kids? When are you having kids? I told him, I said, if you decide you want to have kids, let me know before my 35th birthday.
so it was like right before your 35th birthday?
No, it was 4 months before my 36th birthday.
Oh, so he didn't exactly follow the rules.
No, so after he finished his master's degree, he had one day an epiphany, I guess, and he's looking around the house and he's like, we're building all of this, but where's the legacy? So he told me right before my 36th birthday. And of course, I'm thinking, you just do what married people do, and voila, here comes kids. And it doesn't always work like that.
No.
So we went along trying to have, takes about a year, and then the doctors are like, nothing's working. So then that's when you start doing all the things. So we finally got pregnant. And then when we went into the doctor, the nurse wasn't saying anything. And so that was miscarriage number 1. I actually ended up having 2 miscarriages. I had my 13-year-old, he's 13 now. I had my child, a son, and then I had 2 more miscarriages, and then I had my daughter.
Wow.
So I had 4 altogether. And
that's a lot, right? When you're trying to get pregnant and there's nothing happening. You get pregnant, you have a child, and then you have 2 miscarriages. And it's like, what?
You have 2 miscarriages, and then
you have a son.
And then you have 2 more miscarriages, and you're like,
yeah.
So, yeah.
It's so difficult.
Yeah.
So then what brought you to saying, I need to write a book about this?
Well, because I found myself sharing my story every time I talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I shared my story and I went, I'm going to write a book, I got physically sick. I got sick to my stomach, and I thought, I will never say that again. And literally before that, my editor was saying, go home and just write 30 minutes a day. Well, after I said that, I went home and I started writing all night. I would put everybody to bed and I wrote all night for about, I think, a month and a half, maybe 6 weeks.
Wow.
And then I presented it to my editor, and there was the process. But I just did not want to sit and tell my story verbally anymore to passerbys. And I'm like, I always felt like, okay, you need to get this out. You need to, because I've always journaled.
Right.
So that's how that happened. And so, we published in 2019, actually.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
So then tell me a little bit about each of the pregnancies. How far along were you with each of your miscarriages, and were they different? Did they feel different from each other versus when you had a full-term baby?
Well, the first miscarriage I had, we finally, because I was at advanced maternal age, the doctor was like, well, we wait, 12 weeks and then we do the ultrasound and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we went there, and then the nurse wasn't saying anything. We didn't hear a heartbeat. We were so excited. We were, video and everything, because we had already planned to do an anniversary party and we were going to announce it and blah, blah, blah.
Aww.
So there was no baby. So then the second time I got pregnant, pretty much the same thing. Whereas beforehand, it was all of them were the first trimester.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I noticed is that once I would get pregnant, no, once I would lose a baby or before I got pregnant, I was trying to lose weight because I gained 50 pounds trying to get pregnant. It's
Wow.
not as easy as people say.
No.
And so I would stop taking my allergy medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't want anything to affect the baby. But
Right.
once I would take the allergy medicine, I would get pregnant. So my husband, he's a computer programmer, so he researched what that was about.
Mm-hmm.
And because I live in Florida, and I started with
My listeners know I live in Florida too, so.
Yes, I started with the allergies around that time. So he learned that there's hostile mucus everywhere. We just think of it in here,
Mm-hmm.
but hostile mucus can stop, the sperm from getting to the egg as well.
Right.
So when I took the allergy medicine, that would clear up all the mucus and
Interesting.
I would get pregnant. So that was some of the things we had to research and found out. And then I have a sickle cell trait. And the doctors kept saying that wasn't why I was not, carrying the babies to full term. But I'm like, something is happening. It has to be something. Where in sickle cell trait, it is the blood cells are in a sickle shape and
Mm-hmm.
not quite oval like they're supposed to be. So there's a blockage there. And so, I would get the babies tested and they would say, oh, it's a healthy baby. And I'm like, well, it's not, because it's not here.
Right.
So, tell me what's happening. Something is wrong.
Right. There needs to be more answers. So did they
Yeah.
finally get to the root of what the issue was, or did you just get pregnant because you got pregnant and that was that?
Well, yeah, I got pregnant all the 2 times I did carry my baby to term, my kids to terms. I got pregnant just from doing, the old fashioned way. Nothing worked. I did IUI. I did IVF. I did everything. I did all the things, and I never got. In fact, when I did IVF, I sat there and saw 3 embryos go in, and then 2 weeks later, we tested, and there was no pregnancy. I'm like, I watched myself give. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot going on. So no, they never did find out, but they did put me on progesterone. And when it came time to go off the progesterone, I talk about this in the book. My husband and the doctor had some type of male standoff. I was like, I don't know what this is. My husband was like, he was ready to take me off progesterone, but he said nothing would happen if I stayed on it. And my husband was like, well, we've done that before. Let's just stay on the progesterone if there's nothing. He goes, well, I don't think there's a reason. So they had some kind of standoff. And I'm like, well, whatever y'all decide, just let me know.
Right. I'm right here. Just fill me in when you're done.
Yeah. So
did you end up staying on it?
Needless to say, I stayed on the progesterone.
So then maybe your progesterone levels were dropping and that's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. They were always saying that the progesterone was low, but then they did this one weird thing. And I talk about this in the book, where I was taking the progesterone orally, and then they switched it to vaginally. So I'm like, never. So they tried everything. I mean, they really did. My doctors were amazing. My doctor is top notch. In fact, he just retired after he delivered over 25,000 babies.
Wow. I mean, that's what you really need. I think the problem is that we like to second guess ourselves, but we don't feel like we're the experts, even though we really are. We're the experts in our own bodies. So
Yeah.
the fact that your doctor listened to you, listened to your husband, was able to really then assess the situation and say, look, if you want to stay on progesterone, I'm not going to stop you. And I mean, that would seem like it was the answer.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the answer was. I did everything but stand on my head. And in fact, we did this process where after I would hold my legs up. And then it's like when it got to the point where we didn't want, we were done because my husband got a vasectomy 6 weeks after my daughter. I'm like, am I supposed to hold my head up? I'm at my legs up after we get together. I wasn't sure. And I was so confused.
I
So
know all of those years you had this whole routine going, and then all of a sudden you're not having kids anymore, and you're like, wait, we could be totally normal.
yeah. Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. So then I guess you make it seem so easy. I feel like you've such a positive attitude, and I know that each time it's so different. Sometimes it affects you a lot, sometimes it doesn't affect you. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start my podcast, because everybody has their own way of coming at it. But it feels like, at least looking back on it felt easier than maybe what you're making it seem.
Well, we're 10 years from that. And let me just
Okay.
explain to you when we talk about loss, the pain of for the power of forgiveness portion of it. During that same time, I was going through the process of forgiving my dad for abandoning my mom after she gave birth to me. So he
Uh,
didn't raise me. But when I was 6 months pregnant, I talk about this in the book. When I was 6 months pregnant, his partner of 34 years died.
wow.
And when I was 8 months pregnant, my dad actually died.
Wow.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
lot. But my dad became my best friend. He literally walked me through everything that, all the issues that I had, because even though I forgave him, there were times where the forgiveness, I got triggered a lot of times
Uh,
during the process. And he just really walked me through it. He really helped me. He gave me what I need. And that's why we were talking ahead of time to ask for what you need. There were so many different things that we discussed and we talked about. He apologized to me. I felt like I needed an apology. I told him I needed an apology. He apologized to me. And that didn't work for me as far as forgiveness.
mhm.
I mean, it came right down to the point where his partner, his wife, well, that's in the book. It's kind of a secret behind that.
Okay.
But on her deathbed in hospice, she apologized to me for writing me out of his will when I was 3.
Wow.
So there was a lot going on. But,
Yeah.
I thought, it was so crazy because when she gave me that apology, I'm standing there. One thing that I learned from that is that when I'm on my deathbed and we're all going to get there, I don't want to be apologizing to anyone
Right.
because that apology wasn't for me, it was for her. So I realized at that point too, because I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? Because at that point, I had forgiven her as well.
Right.
So I think all things work out for the best.
Completely. And I think that it's all in your perspective, where grief is grief. Grief is always going to be difficult. But if you can walk through it and really understand that you keep going, you're still here, you have the power to do as you will. And I tell my kids this all the time, and I've said it multiple times on my own podcast. You have control over your own thoughts, your own speech, and your own action. No one else's. And it's
Yeah.
all in how you then move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's so important. That was a major lesson I learned in all of that because I was doing all the things, but my dad was a juvenile diabetic. And
Mhm.
so he had medical issues, because back in the 60s or, when he was born, they didn't know what diabetes was. So
Right.
it was always a death sentence for him. So he really was doing everything he could to survive. And then right around the time where we started to, talk about having kids, my husband and I, my dad had to get an amputation, his leg amputated. And he really was talking to me and he said, I don't think I want to make it. I don't think I want to go on anymore. I'm really tired of this. It's been years. I mean, he was in his 50s by that point, so it had been 40 something years he had been dealing with that. And so I asked him at that point, I said, Dad, we are just getting to the point where we're getting our relationship closer. We're mending our relationship, but I'm just not ready for you to go yet. I need you to hold on and I need you to fight this thing. And so he did. He lived for another 3.5 years. So when it
Wow.
came time for him to, when he did die, I literally, after she died, I had to have a conversation with him, the difficult conversation, and say, I appreciate you for living 3 additional years after you were ready to go. And now if you're ready to go, you're in so much pain. I totally get it.
Yeah.
So I talk about all of that in my book. I'm probably giving you a whole lot about the book. There are still some secrets in there, and it's like,
I mean,
some,
if it sounds like the way you speak, it sounds like an incredible book.
yeah, I had an amazing time writing it. And then when I finished writing it, because it was 6 years after everything happened, I went, man, I think I like this girl.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, because there was a lot I had to go through, and I'm like, she's pretty bad. She's a bad chick. So
No
yeah,
joke.
yeah. So yeah, and I can smile about it now because, like I said, it's been 10 years removed now, and actually, yeah, 10 years. And so yeah, it's. I think life is good, and we can't be miserable for one day. You
Right.
have to look back on the things that have happened and say, what did I learn from that? That was one of my major prayers during the miscarriage. I said, God, what are you trying to teach me from this?
Mhm.
And whatever it is, I want to learn it because I don't want to have to go through this again.
Right. It's so interesting that you said that because there's so many people that I've spoken to already who I think for the people who have really worked to get through it, their faith is so strong. And it's something that we have no idea why God does the things that God does. We have no idea why we're here on earth. And we have no idea why other people don't get the opportunity to be here on earth or why other souls don't get the opportunity to be here on earth. Why are people taken early? Why do people live till over 100? We have no idea in the grand scheme of things. And I think that that faith is so, so important to be able to connect to you and saying, look, I- there are things that are going to happen that I'm going to be sad about and I'm going to be upset about. But I know that everything happens for a reason. And it's a really hard thing to come to terms with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is. It's a difficult thing to come to terms with, but I think the quicker we do come to terms with it and say to ourselves, yeah, that happened.
Yep.
I think we can process it and move forward
Yeah.
and just live life to the fullest. You know, I retired over the last summer, which is when I started my podcast, Black Butterfly, Black Pearls. And I'm like, when they sent me the note saying, hey, you've taught for 20 years. I was a psychology professor. You've taught for 20 years. You've taught this many students. I really evaluated and said, well, what more can I do in that space?
Right.
So, and then that's when I said, that sounds like a fitting into a career, a wonderful career. I've had a great time, but now let's transition into something else. And I think that's important for us to do in life is to
Hmm.
move forward and not necessarily continue to look for something else, but be ready when something else comes about.
Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy for anything because certainly bad things are going to happen. But if you keep looking towards the blessings that you have, then the bad things don't seem as bad. My best friend and I were just talking about that, where she said to me a few weeks ago, it's interesting. Right now, she was in a space of immense grief, and she said, "We never look to God and say thank you for the blessings that you've given me." And she said, "I can look back at my life and think I've had a blessed life, and I feel so grateful for that. Yeah, there are bad things that happen, and I know that, but thank you for everything that you've given me, also," which is
Yeah,
such a good attitude to have.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you were working, because it sounded like you had taught for 20 years, which is phenomenal, and I can't even imagine how many students you touched and changed lives. You were also then trying to conceive. So did that affect anything with your work, or did you take time off?
No, it really did. In fact, I had one miscarriage and I literally went to work that day.
Wow.
Yeah, and my supervisor was like, I
You
think it's
don't
a
have to be
liability.
here.
Yeah. He was like, I think it's a liability for you to be here. And I said, it helps me to be here.
Mhm.
In fact, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had about 3 jobs because I really was trying to focus and like move, do a lot of do all the things. So I did not sit there and just wallow on, okay, this is it. I've had
Hmm.
4 miscarriages. So I just really kept myself busy during that time. But yeah, I think it was very helpful for me to go and help other people and talk to other people, which is why I had the podcast, because that space it's always, I think, important for us to share what we've gone through and what we've learned
Right.
out of the process. So that's what really helped me. So no, I didn't take any time off. My emotions were all over the place though. I found myself being grumpy and getting in trouble sometimes at work because I was kind of short and snippy with some people and they were like, I'm reporting you. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, and it's so hard because you have no idea where someone's coming from.
Yeah, you never know what somebody's going through. One time my allergies were acting crazy and my student wanted to shake my hand and I'm like, well, I've been wiping my nose, but it's like
Right, you're
only
like, oh, I
so
don't know what
much.
to do.
Yeah, it's only so much you can say while you're in the middle of, so you refuse to shake hands, and I had already told the students before, that I had allergies and different things going on, but I was literally in the process of having a miscarriage then. So it was a lot, and people don't know. But that's why I also encourage individuals, you don't know what anyone is going through. So be nice to everyone. Just be
Yeah.
kind and cordial, and if they are snippy or they're having a bad day or they cut you off, let it go.
My friend says it is not about you.
No, no.
Um, could you enjoy the pregnancies for your two kids that you gave birth to full term because of the fact that you did go through four miscarriages?
I really did. I enjoyed the pregnancies a lot. I enjoyed the babies once they got here. I nursed both of them. I still enjoy them today. There's nothing for me to call, tell Alexa for one of them to come and snuggle with me and I kiss their face.
Oh,
And
I
I
love
mean,
that.
I got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. My 13-year-old is huge. He's a big kid,
Yeah,
13 shoe, and he's 5'10" now. And I still just kiss his face and he loves it.
that's awesome. I know I look at mine. My daughter is now slightly taller than I am, and she's my oldest. And I looked at her the other day and I just smushed her face and I was like, I don't know where my baby went.
Yeah, you have to do that. You have to love on them. I look at them now and I'm like, dang, I only get 5 years left with you, Not that they're going to go because we've told them they don't have to go. We've
Right.
set them up for the future, but it's like until you're at majority, you only have 5 years and it goes so fast. So
Yeah.
we try to do all the things. We travel a lot, which is one of the reasons why I retired too. So I didn't take away that time while I was grading papers to take that away from my kids.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, yeah, we're done.
That's amazing. I mean, it really sounds like you set out on a journey, you set out on a path and you're getting there. You're working your way towards the goals that you want and you're connecting people and you're connecting with your children and you're connecting with your husband and I mean, first of all, I can't wait to read your book, but second of all, you're you amaze me. Like your attitude towards things is just beautiful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Is there any piece of advice that you'd like to give to my listeners if they're going through a similar situation with a miscarriage or with a tough pregnancy?
I would encourage individuals to dream big. And that's one thing that helped me visualizing seeing that baby. So I did a lot of the psychology that I teach.
Mhm.
I taught to visualize the baby. Just like when I saw the eggs actually go in when I did the IVF. When I did not do the IVF and my husband and I were, doing what married people do, doing what it takes to get babies, I would visualize it. I would sit
Mhm.
there and visualize the sperm getting with the egg and all the things. So I think it's so important to visualize where you want to be and remind yourself the type of parent you want to be. So at the times when my kids are like going there, it's like, I just, I try to pull back because my son, he doesn't like for me to get loud. He goes, but he's the loudest one. Let him go in his room and play video games. He's so loud. And I'm like, son, really? I heard that. Son, cut it out.
Mm,
Calm
mhm.
down. But then when I'm like, he's like, mommy, not so loud.
Oh.
So we teach them to, say what they want to say to us. They just have to be respectful with it. So he's always asking me to bring it down.
That's
So,
funny.
I just watch myself with them because I know you know your children and you know what they're okay with. So to get loud with him, my daughter, I never have to get loud with her. She was giving me a fit Saturday, and I just was like, okay, kid, I'm going to take my walk. I'm going to listen to my book, and I need you to chill out because you have been on one today. So I honestly just talk to them, and I, encourage them. So I just encourage other individuals to visualize what you want. Once you get it, be the best that you can be at everything you do.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect way to end. I know this was kind of a short conversation, but I loved it. It was absolutely perfect.
Thank you.
Where can people find you in order to get your book, get your podcast?
My book is Butterfly Blue, The Pain of Infertility and the Power of Forgiveness. It is on Amazon. My podcast is Black Butterfly, Black Pearls, and that is on everywhere you get your podcast. I love to walk in my house and say, Alexa, play Black Butterfly, Black Pearls podcast, and everything. It just starts talking, and it's me and my friend of over 45 years. We've been friends since I was 6 and she was 5. So
Wow.
we're on the podcast together, and you actually have couple of podcasts where she's walking me through times when I've been triggered with a situation that I've forgiven someone and I get triggered. So we actually not necessarily do therapy, but she walks me through and I'm honest about, hey, I was triggered and and she knows to ask all the questions because heck, we've been friends for over 45 years.
Right.
And then I always bring in research. And right now, the research that we're talking about, I think I mentioned it to you. We've done self-care we've done self-care, we've done red flags in dating, we've done how to know when someone's gaslighting you, we've done build self-esteem, how to avoid self-doubt, and what we're working on now is how to ask for what you want in a relationship. So we always have in research with our podcast. And then I'm on Facebook, and also my husband and I are marriage coaches. So we have Nick, Nik, and Adinah on YouTube, and that's our marriage coaching.
I mean, I know you said you're retired, but it does not sound like you have slowed down.
No, absolutely not.
Well, that's amazing. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your beautiful smile with everybody. And I thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me today on Pushing Through Loss. I hope this episode has provided support, understanding, and a sense of community. Remember, you are not alone on your journey, and you have the strength to face the challenges that come your way. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave me a review and consider sharing it with others who may benefit. Together, we can help each other heal and activate our inner strength warriors. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations, and until next time, you got this.